All right, so now we're looking at from the benchmark, question 27. A paper airplane was thrown from the top of a building. Height of the paper airplane above the ground can be found using the function y is equal to -1.5 times the value of x plus 60, where x is the time in seconds the airplane has been in the air. How many seconds did it take the paper airplane to reach the ground? Okay, remember, if it reaches the ground, that's when they're saying that it has a height of 0. So its height is 0 because it's not up in the air. So let's think about this. If we are thinking about this in terms of x and y, would height be an x number or a y number? Well, if they're asking us, guys, for how many seconds, that has to be time. So they're asking us for the x value. We don't know the x value, but we do know the y value. The y value is 0. And look what they gave us to use. They gave us an equation. So let's go to our calculator. I'm going to clear this out. Let's go to our calculator and y equals, and let's type in our function. Just because it's not a quadratic doesn't mean we can't do the same thing that we do for quadratics and use our calculator. Well, I'm going to go to my table. I'm going to see if I can figure out how many seconds it takes for y to get 0. And if this is why I'm scrolling down, because I notice my y values are decreasing. So I'm going to go down. And I'm going to keep scrolling down, 21, 18, 15. It looks like I'm getting closer to 0. And I have a 0 y value when x is equal to 40. So this is 40. So I know it takes me 40 seconds to hit the ground. I also want to check this out in my calculator. And if I know I have to go out to x on the 40, when I graph it, I know I'm not going to see that y value or x value. So I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to take off some of my negative x's because I don't need them because of time. And I'm going to go out to 50, and I'm going to count by 5s. And let's graph that and see. All right, and then that would be the positive. You can think of it as the positive root. It kind of matches up to where a positive root would be on the parabola. So I'm going to go to second trace, and I'm looking for a 0 because that's what I would call it if it was a parabola. And so remember, I want to get my cursor as close to y is 0 as possible. There's my cursor. All right, so I'm going to get it set up as close to where I think the positive root or the 0 would be, the x-intercept. And now I'm going to go left twice and lock in. And now I've got to go right twice will get me back to my x-intercept, but then I need to go right 2 more times. So I'm really going right 4 times. And I'm going to lock in, and now I'm going to hit enter to guess. And I do get an answer of 0 using my calculator. So it did take 40 seconds for this paper airplane to hit the ground. All right, let's look at the next question. We've got graphs of linear functions f and g are shown on the grid. So we've got f here, and then we've got g here. Which function is best represented by the graph of g? So they're wanting us to compare if we started at f and then we ended up changing things in the equation and we ended up with g, what happened? So let's look here. Let's look at our transformation. So we got to look. We got to think IHOD over, okay? You want to think IHOD, and then you want to think over. You also want to look at your slope, okay? Did your slope get bigger? Did your slope get smaller? Okay? So the first one here, I don't see any parentheses, so that tells me that this is an over answer, which means it's outside the parentheses. It's going to be vertical, which means the only directions that movement can go is up and down, and it's going to do exactly what I think it should. And we're going to talk about range values because, again, range has to do with y. Y is the only axis that goes up and down. Those are its only directions. So this right here, if I see -4 and I think up or down, I'm always going to think down 4, and that's exactly what it's going to do. But if I look at the G graph, look at the y-intercept. If it started at 0, 0, that would have moved down 4, and now G would have gone through -4, but it doesn't. So A cannot be the correct answer. And then I'm going to look at C because I noticed I also have another outside number, and it's going to do exactly what I think. Well, when I think up or down, when I think -2, I'm thinking down 2, and that's exactly what it's going to do. But as you can see, we started at the origin, and if we move down 2, then G should pass through -2 on the y-axis, and it doesn't. So that takes out C as well. So that leaves us between B and D. And if you look here, this is like a slope. This is like a slope number. So I've got to look at what these two slopes are doing to my equation. M equals 1/3 or M equals 3. So here, if my slope, let's say my slope was 1, because that's what it's always going to start at. Your slope value is always going to be 1 if they don't tell you. And so it went from 1 to 1/3. So my slope actually got smaller. If your slope gets smaller, what's going to happen to your line, guys, is it is going to get flatter. Okay, it's going to move towards the x-axis, and it's going to kind of tilt away from the y-axis, and it's going to get flatter. If your slope gets bigger, it's going to rotate closer to the y-axis, and it's actually going to get steeper. Okay, so now let's look here at this one. Well, if I start with a slope of 1 and then I move to 3, it's getting bigger, so my graph of G should have actually gotten steeper. But look, if we look at G, it rotated down towards the x-axis, and it actually got flatter. G is flatter than F, so we have to have a smaller slope, which means the correct answer is B. All right, last one. We're going to look at 42. The table shows the linear relationship. Okay, so we know it's a line, which means I now know how I can get to my equation in my calculator. I can do a linear regression where I type it in stat enter. So let's see what the question is. Based on the table, what is the rate of change of the balance of the student's savings? Okay, if I see rate of change, guys, I want to think slope. And I can get the slope just by taking this, but I'm going to use my calculator since they gave me a table. I'm going to do stat enter, and I'm going to type in all my x values. Remember, in a horizontal table, x is top row, y is bottom row. So 0, 1, 3, 6, 8, 13, and the bottom one is 32, 39, 53, 74, 88, and 123. And then after I type in my table, I'm going to go to stat, I'm going to arrow over to calc, and then I want to pick, since it's a line, I've got to pick linear, so that's 4, and then I'm going to arrow down to calculate, and I'm going to press enter, and it tells me that A is equal to 7, B is equal to 32, and if I put this in my equation, it's going to be y equals 7x plus 32. Well, if I have a y equals equation, I know that x marks the slope, so my slope is 7. So your slope is equal to 7.